am so grateful you're here and so excited to introduce you to my presenter on this segment. She is Laura Doyle, New York's best-selling author, and she was the perfect wife until she actually got married. When she told her husband how to be tidier, more romantic, and more ambitious, he avoided her. So she dragged him to marriage counseling and nearly divorced him. In desperation, she asked happily married women for their secrets, and that's when she got her miracle. The man who had wooed her had returned. Laura's books have been translated into 19 languages in 30 countries and started a worldwide movement of women who practice the 6 intimacy skills. And there's a whole bunch of other accolades I could read about you, but what would you really like Summit viewers to know about you?
Well, I think if I'm honest, it would be to say that I'm also just a wife whose marriage was in a big breakdown years ago, and that that I was sitting on the marriage counselor's drab gray couch when I realized that my marriage was hopeless and that I was either going to spend the rest of my life in a loveless relationship or else I was going to have to get divorced. And so that I decided to get divorced. And there was just one problem, that I was too embarrassed to get divorced. So as a last ditch effort, I decided I was going to ask women who had happy marriages, seemed like happy marriages, and they'd been married for an eternity, which is 15 years. I was going to ask them for their secrets. And so they said things that didn't even make sense to me. I remember one woman said, well, I try never to criticize my husband, no matter how much it seems like he deserves it. And I was like, got anything else? I don't think I can do that. I don't know if I even should do that. That doesn't sound right. But I decided I was going to experiment with everything that they said because I really had no other options. And if it worked, I would keep it. And if it didn't, I would throw it out. And I remember I'd been trying some of their ideas for not even that long, Monica. And we had been having either wall-to-wall hostility at my house, or else we had cold wars where there was no talking and it was just very tense and unpleasant. And I remember just a little while after learning a few of these things, I walked through the door and my husband's face lit up. He was happy to see me. And that had been gone for a long time. So I thought, okay, there's something going on here. There's something working. And I was pretty excited about it because I felt so much hope that I was now going to be able to fix my marriage, to make it last and make it the one that I had wanted so badly, right? When I was a little girl, I started, dreaming about how my marriage would be. And so I was really crushed when it was not that long after that we were in the car and we had a big blow up fight again. And we're saying mean, horrible things to each other. And I knew that I wouldn't want anyone to know what the things that I had said. Like if there was a video of it, I would do whatever I had to just, make sure that never got out. And I thought, oh my gosh, why is this happening? Because I know what to do, but I couldn't get myself to do it. It wasn't that hard. It was just new. And I had this idea of, well, if I could, maybe I'll get some of my friends to do this with me, and maybe that'll give me the structure and the support that I need to be able to do this. And so I did. I got a little support group in my living room. I had 4 other women, and we started meeting, and they were reporting miracles in their marriages. And I was feeling this new level of accountability. Like I was telling them, say this or do that. And I thought, well, I better not be a hypocrite. I better do it too. So, and from that first little support group, I was able to continue to do the things that I knew would really serve the intimacy and the connection in my marriage. And that's how I got the marriage I have today. That was over 20 years ago. We're celebrating our 20th year of empowering wives to be ridiculously happy, which is really exciting. And so today I have the marriage that I dreamed I would have, where my husband just grabs me, like I'll be passing him in the hall. He just pulls my waist and pulls me in, and he has to have a kiss. Or, he makes bedroom eyes at me, and we just laugh together a lot. It's playful, it's light, it's fun. It feels really fortifying. So I guess I just want other women to know I'm just like them. I just wanted to have a good marriage, and I was so stuck. I didn't know how to do it.
Yeah, I love your story because it's so relatable, and really relationship is all about the skills. Which is crazy because we don't learn them at school, and a lot of us don't learn it explicitly in our families either. But if we're willing to make the effort and learn these skills, it really makes such a massive difference. I mean, we really can transform our relationships to go from like a lot of contention and fighting and just negative energy to these beautiful, wonderful, flourishing relationships that we want to exemplify to our kids. So I love your story. But today, for the time we have together, I want to talk about the three most common mistakes that put our marriage at risk. And I love the way you tell stories and talk about these. So let's start with number one. What is the most common mistake we often make that puts our marriage at risk?
Well, this is one that I famously made. So, it was that I was trying to be too helpful to my husband, and I see this with so many of my students right now. So now we've helped tens of thousands of women make their marriages last, and it's just such a common thing where we think we can help them improve. We can make their doctor's appointments for them so they'll be healthier, or teach them how to eat better, or give them suggestions what to do at work, or maybe help them make a resume. And all of that, in wife language, it's helpful, and we think that's good to be helpful. And what I didn't realize is that in husband language, it lands as control and even criticism. It's sort of a way of saying, I don't think you're that competent, so I'm going to have to swoop in and kind of show you how to do things. Maybe someday you'll grow up and figure out how to be an adult. But until that time, let me show you how to raise these kids. Let me show you how to be a father, right? Let me show you how to do better at work. And of course, it's an enormous amount of pressure on us in a way too, because we don't really know what's best for our husbands to do at work. And we don't really know how to be fathers, right? Women can only be mothers. We don't know what that involves to be a father. It's a totally different thing. So, and one of my longtime students has just a great story about this, because she was the CFO of a large private school. So she had a big job, and she was really good at it. She could really just run a tight ship at work as the CFO. So she was really in the habit of doing that with her husband too, of telling him, how she was paying all the bills. She was the primary breadwinner. And their marriage was really in a lot of trouble. They'd been sleeping in separate beds for 6 months. And it was their second marriage. They had a blended family, and they were just right on the edge of divorce. She was going to a counselor every week by herself to complain about her husband, Doug. And of course, nobody ever got happier that way, by complaining about their spouse for an hour a week, right? So she got a hold of my first book, and her mind was blown, like, oh my gosh, maybe I have something to do with this. Maybe I am too helpful. And the first thing that happened was Doug said to her, when she got done reading the book, you need to tell me what you want me to do with our cell phone plan. Because that's how she trained him, that if he was going to make a decision, he better check with her first so he didn't get in trouble later. So she decided to use one of the cheap phrases that we use for relinquishing inappropriate control, for stop being too helpfulness. And that phrase is, whatever you think. So that's what Kathy said to Doug, whatever you think. And he just looked at her funny, like, wait, no, this is not how we interact. This is a trick. And he goes, no, I really need you to tell me what I should do. And so she just stuck with her line. She said, whatever you think. And she added, I trust you. And so he went away and made the decision on the phone plan. And she was really afraid he was going to screw it up, but he didn't. He did fine, of course. And she didn't marry an idiot, right? So that night he came up to her and said, you were so nice today. And he put his hand on her shoulder. And remember, there'd been a pretty tense Cold War going on at their house. So she said tears just kind of welled up in her eyes, and they slept in the same bed that very night. And the next day she quit counseling and decided to study the 6 intimacy skills instead. And that was over 20 years ago. And she still gets tears in her eyes when she talks about how tragic it would have been to throw out this marriage to the man that is clearly the love of her life now.
Oh, I love that story. So being a little too helpful might cross the line into being critical, maybe disrespectful, a little bit of a mothering syndrome in there, all those things mixed in. So yeah, I love that. So I think the takeaway for me is that let's examine the way that we're managing all of the, maybe micromanaging our husbands, and see if maybe we can relinquish a little bit of that.
Yeah, it's such a relief. I was just talking to a student this morning who was talking about what an amazing relief it is to not be the know-it-all all the time. Like her husband was starting a business and she was really experimenting with just trusting and expecting the best. She was using, we call them spouse fulfilling prophecies, like you make great decisions, you have such great ideas. And sure enough, he started this business. She'd been the primary breadwinner. She's an ophthalmologist. And he started this business, and it's taken off so big. It's their primary income. She's cut down to part-time, which is great for her. She's got small children still. So she was so excited to see what a different result. She's like, I could have squashed the whole thing by giving him my opinion, trying to be helpful about how he should run his business. She stayed out of that. And it was really empowering for this husband to look in his wife mirror and see, oh, she trusts me. She thinks I'm smart. People tend to rise to our expectations for them.
Oh, I love it. So good, not only for marriage, but any relationship, just FYI. Okay, let's move on to mistake number 2.
Mistake number 2, and this was a big one for me, is we don't know what it is we want. In fact, one of my students told me this funny little cheer. She goes, who are we? We're women. What do we want? We don't know. When do we want it? Right now. Right. And I could totally relate to that because I remember in the bad old days in my marriage, I used to say to my husband, John, this kitchen is a disaster. And I thought he was going to jump off the couch and start cleaning the kitchen. And that just never happened. Of course it didn't. Right. That's not how anything works. But I thought I was telling him what I wanted. I thought he knew I would want him to clean up the disaster kitchen, but I wasn't saying what I wanted. I was just complaining. And he couldn't even hear me when I was complaining. I have a theory he could hear like, John, rah, 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 like was the rest of it just was lost on him. And so, and now I've got a much better technique, which is expressing my desires in a way that inspires him. And there's a little formula for it that I love. It's really powerful. And it takes a little bit getting used to because a lot of us are trained along the lines of complaining instead of figuring out our desires. And it feels a little vulnerable to say them sometimes. So, but finally one day I got this formula and I thought, I'm going to try it. And I said to him, John, I would love a clean kitchen. And it was the same disaster kitchen, right? And he goes, okay. He goes, I'll clean it. And he did. And he did it like with a smile, like willingly, like no nagging, no repeating. And that was over 20 years ago. And he's been doing it ever since. I never do the dishes at my house because, why? My husband knows what I want. He knows how to make me happy. And that turns out that's a big goal of his. In fact, I've asked thousands of men, how important is it to you that your wife is happy? And they have all said the same thing. They'll say, oh, it's the most important thing, or they'll say it's everything, or in the UK, they say it's imperative. So it's really kind of inspiring to see how important that is to husbands, that their wives are happy. And I had a student who had a great story about this, where she was, her husband had already said that he wanted a divorce, and they were living like roommates, awkward roommates in their house. And she was trying to use the connection framework. She was in one of my programs using the connection framework to try to restore her marriage, but she didn't really think it was going to work. But she was just kind of, doing the suggestions, and she was hopeful, and she kind of liked how she felt a little more dignified, to use the cheap phrases and the intimacy skills. And then one day he was sitting on the couch watching TV, and she thought, I'm just going to experiment with expressing my desires. And she said, so she used the formula, which is, I would love a leg massage, which is just the final outcome, not who's going to do it, not how it's going to get done. She just said, I would love a leg massage. And he goes, and they weren't speaking, they weren't touching, nothing. And he goes, did you want it right now? And she's all like, oh my God, he's going to give me a leg massage. And she's like, she's shocked, right? She almost falls over. And then she's like, yeah, okay, right now. Yeah. Oh, great. And then he gave her a leg massage. And this was the beginning of a slow dance of reconciliation for them. And she went on to actually become a relationship coach with us now, because her marriage got so strong, got so good. He actually built a fire pit in the backyard for them to sit outside and have romantic nights together shortly after that. So something was working. And I think this expressing desires lets them know that we're pleasable and how they can succeed at it. And they love that. And then of course, so do we, because we get what we would desire.
That's really interesting because you always hear that phrase like happy wife, happy life. And there's different ways you can look at it. But if you really think about it, it's our husbands want us to be happy. Like that's good for us that we're happy and good for them that they can feel a little bit of ownership. Like if I know what she wants, then I can make her happy. Like, not that our husbands are supposed to make us happy, but they love that. They really do. And I think your research shows that. Like, husbands enjoy happy wives. And so if they can do something to, fulfill a desire for us, that's like, wow, they love it.
They do. They love being our heroes. And you can trigger his hero gene by expressing that desire and then also being pleasable on the other side. That's pretty important too. Because I know for me, sometimes in the battle days, my husband would do something to please me, like clean the kitchen. And at the end, I'd be like, well, okay, you did the dishes, but you know what? What about you didn't wipe off the counters? Like, can you just do that? Right. So there was not really a level of pleasability. I made up that word, but it really just reflects, unfortunately, the old unpleasant toothache of a person that I was in my early marriage, where no matter what he did, it really wasn't good enough because I came in with so much resentment and bitterness and I think defensiveness and fear also. So if you can muster that gratitude and that I call it the woman of fun and light, who's just kind of smiling, happy, singing, dancing. We're never hotter than when we are showing that, gosh, you did make me happy just now. You do have a happy wife and a happy life.
I love it. So good. So good. Okay. Mistake number 3.
All right. Well, mistake number 3 is when you are wanting your husband to spend more time or give you more attention or give you more affection. And you say that to him. And I have to preface this by saying that's what I did all the time in my early marriage, because I read advice from absolutely everyone that said, if you aren't getting enough affection, you need to speak up about it. You need to tell him what you need. And so I was doing this a lot. So I would say, I'd like you to be more affectionate. Or I remember one thing I read said, tell him you have a deep concern about his lack of affection, right? So I laugh when I think about it now. I was like, that is so critical. It's so repelling. If you want to be a porcupine wife, that's what you should say, right? It just doesn't work. And the reason is there were a couple of problems with it. So one was that every time I was asking him for affection, it was really evidence that he didn't feel affection for me. And that was sad. That was, made me feel bad because when we were falling in love, like the guy couldn't get enough of me, right? And he couldn't keep his hands off of me. And so I just knew every time I was saying it, it's because he doesn't want to. And that just hurts a lot. So that wasn't working. And then it's also pretty repelling. I just think about it like with a friend. If you say to a friend, like, you're not spending enough time with me, we really need to go to lunch. You haven't made me a priority. I mean, wouldn't you just be like repelled by that friend? You'd be like, yeah, I'm going to put that on my calendar I have time in 2030. How's that for you? Right. Like you just wouldn't want to be around that. So, but it's a common theme. And it's like, well, but I'm feeling lonely and I'm married and that's not right. And I get that, like that. I remember that feeling and it was awful. And so, but what we've seen is that when you prioritize your own happiness by doing the things that fill you up. So this is like the first thing that we ask students to do when they arrive on the campus. I want you to make a list of 20 things that bring you joy. So it could be activities, could be non-activities, could be a nap, could be paddleboarding, could be playing with your cat, could be playing the guitar, whatever it is for you, right? I always joke like, some people put yoga on their list. I'm like, oh, I don't like yoga. So that wouldn't go on my self-care list. Like I love volleyball. In yoga, they don't even keep score. I don't know how you can tell if you're doing it better than everybody else. That one doesn't work for me. So it has to be very customized list specific to you. And then we invite her to do at least 3 things on that list every day, just to fill up her cup, just to be able to show up as her best self. And it's interesting to see. I remember this was true for me. I was like, I don't have that kind of time. Like I work, I have to take care of the house and we got to maintain the cars and pay the bills. And right. There was like all these I had a never ending to-do list and it never seemed to get done. And that kept me from being able to do the things that I love. But once I started making that the priority, and we see this with our students all the time, my time seemed to expand. And isn't it true that when you show up filled up and happy, you have more energy to give to everyone? And then you create less drama, right? Because, and I'll give you an example, kind of a sad example. So a few years ago, I was traveling across country to speak, and I was going to tell other women, how to have an intimate relationship, how to use the intimacy skills. And then on the way back, I just didn't time it right. So I ended up like with no sleep, and I hadn't eaten. And my husband picked me up at the airport, and I was a mess. I was like, I was saying, like, don't circle the airport again, just stay at the curb. Like, you can do that at the airport, right? There's no sign of my bag coming off the carousel, but I'm like, just don't circle again. I'm going to be out there in a second or whatever. And then I get in the car and I'm saying like, oh, I'm so hungry. And he's suggesting lunch options. I'm like, no, that sounds terrible. No, I don't want, it's just really a cranky mess. And, I'm not like that most of the time anymore, because I really try to practice what I preach. And I think that kind of explains what happened next, which is that my husband started laughing at me, and he turned to me and he goes, "It's nice to see you too," because I'd been away, right? And I was so busted. I just thought, oh, like, he's right. I'm not showing up as my best self right now. So there's nothing to do but go, oh, I'm sorry. I'm really depleted. I'm so tired. And of course, I didn't show up as my best self in that situation. And so that's why I consider my self-care to be like self-love, a self-control in a way, right? I can have self-control. If I show up filled up, I can maintain my dignity. And it just feels terrible when I lose that now. When I show up as that other woman, like your mother on her worst day, right? She's a mere mortal woman too, like me. It can still happen. But today, that's my priority. So just making yourself happy. And then what we see, I certainly see this with my husband, he just wants to pile on. You're happy, you're pleasable. Oh my gosh, I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to look for new and exciting ways to delight you. I remember one woman was like, I was so amazed. My husband and I had been arguing about painting the family room. And then she just started getting happy. She started doing some things that she loved to do. And all of a sudden, he decided to paint the family room. And she couldn't believe it. She's like, this, it may not sound like much to you guys, but this is a miracle, because he wanted to see her happy, and she was already happy. So he knew he had a chance to succeed. I had another woman whose husband, they had 5 children. And he was saying, oh, I wish we didn't have any children. I don't even love you. She was really crushed, and felt like her marriage was totally hopeless. And she was a stay-at-home mom. So she just thought, I'm going to be in this loveless marriage forever, because I have all these children, can't even leave him. But that's really where her fantasies went, that she could leave. And she started doing this practice along with the other intimacy skills as part of the connection framework. And so she was listening to a podcast that she loved, and she was folding the laundry. And all of a sudden, her husband comes up to her and just wants to have a conversation with her. She's like, she was listening. She just had her headset on. She was laughing, and she was almost like, "Wait, I'm listening to this right now. Like, I don't want to talk to you." And then she realized, like, "Oh no, I've always wanted him to do this." So they had a nice conversation, and then she overheard him talking to their kids, and she said they were joking and laughing like friends, and that just made her heart so happy. And she just saw a complete transformation in the way her husband showed up when he felt successful at pleasing her.
So good. That's definitely a starting point for sure in anything. And I love the idea that marriage is a dynamic. I mean, it's like a dance. If you show up differently and change the steps, like, your husband has to respond. He absolutely has zero choice in the matter. So it's not like we can change the people around us, but when we change ourselves, the people around us do change. It's really quite amazing. So I love how you illustrate that so beautifully.
Thanks. Yeah, they respond to us so much better when we show up as really our best selves. And that's where the joke was on me, right? All those years I was dragging my husband to marriage counseling. It was because I thought, well, now the counselor can fix him and then I'll finally be happy. That's not how it works.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful realization. I love it. So I want to get personal with you for just a second because I think it's mostly going to be a summary. But if one day you woke up and realized you had allowed life and business and all the things to take precedent over your husband, and now you're feeling disconnected in a rut, what would you personally do in that moment to kind of rebuild the relationship, reignite the spark, and bring the fun back into your marriage?
Well, when I knew this question was coming, and I really had to put my thinking cap on, because I have to say that, you hear everywhere that marriage is hard work. You hear that a lot. And honestly, when I got married, it was not to have a second job. It was because my husband was my soft place to land, right? It was where I find out that I'm beautiful, I'm wonderful, I'm special. And that's the way I experience my marriage now. So it doesn't feel like hard work. It doesn't feel like I have to put in any effort, because I think I have these habits that kind of carry me along. So when I thought about that, I thought, if I felt like I was in a rut, felt like there was distance between us, it would mean one of two things. One, that either I had been disrespectful to my husband, and therefore he had been defensive or withdrawn, and then I would also feel hurt. So either I was disrespectful and hurt him, and then got hurt in return, and so that was what was causing the distance. So it sounds kind of crazy, but where I look now, whenever things don't feel exactly the way I, like comfy, easy, fun, passionate, playful, is on my side of the street. What can I clean up that maybe I said or did that wasn't my best self? And so I'll give you an example. We were at a really swanky restaurant one Saturday night, and this restaurant was hopping. The waiters are flying. The bar is all full of laughter and conversation. And the music's playing, and we're just having this really nice conversation. And in the middle of it, I said, he was talking about work, and I said something critical about one of his clients, which he heard as me trying to tell him, you shouldn't give that client preferential treatment. And that is what I was saying. Darn it. Okay. So then all of a sudden you got this look on his face, and I mean, the conversations all stopped around us. The music stopped. The waiter stopped. The good time was gone. And we were about to have a rough night, a rough rest of the night. This good conversation had left. And I thought about it for a second. I was like, oh, I wasn't really ready to be accountable yet. So I said, was that disrespectful? And my husband goes, yeah. And I was like, oh, and I'm like, it's slowly dawning on me, like, yeah, that I was critical. And then I said, I apologize for being disrespectful when I commented on how you're running your business. And he goes, thanks. And then the music came back, and the waiters came back, and the happy noises from the bar, and our good time was back. It was all restored. So for me, this power it's like a superpower I feel like I have now to really restore the connection, comes from being accountable, really looking at what I did, and being willing to, especially to use that word disrespectful. I apologize for being disrespectful. It felt like sawdust in my mouth the first time I said it, but now it just feels like honey coming out, because I know the power it has to return so much intimacy and connection. And I value that so highly.
So good. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. All right. Well, thank you for your time today. Will you please tell us, some of viewers, where they can find you, find your books, and all the wonderful things that you teach?
Well, we have a fun thing going on right now, which is the Adored Wife Roadmap that you can get for free at lauradoyle.org. And it lays out the 6 steps, and also the 3 most common mistakes that women are making when they're trying to get their husband's time, attention, and affection. Give them some different approaches that they can take if that's what they're wanting. So that's free at lauradoyle.org. And then, of course, my books are available wherever books are sold. And we have a really popular podcast also, The Empowered Wife, which is, iTunes, Spotify, and Podcast Bean, and everywhere podcasts are available. So I invite you to check those out.
I love that title. Well, thank you so much for everything.
Thank you, Monica. It's really been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
To learn more ways to deepen your intimacy and strengthen your relationship, make sure you watch this video next.